The day a local cop broke my jaw in the middle of a courtroom, he thought he was just shutting up a loud black woman who didn't know her place. He had no idea he'd just punched a 3-star Army general with the Pentagon on speed dial. In his mind, it was a small-town power move in my world. It was an attack on the uniform I'd worn for 3 decades, and that one hit turned a simple benefits case into the biggest fight of my career. My name is Lieutenant General Elizabeth Clark, United States Army, and this is how a fist in a county courthouse blew open a scheme that had been quietly preying on military families. It started on a Tuesday, the kind of day where the coffee is burnt and your calendar is wall-to-wall meetings, and honestly, I almost sent a colonel in my place. On paper, the case was just another lawsuit, a veteran named David Martinez suing the Millbrook County Veterans Affairs Office because they denied his benefits over his immigration status. My staff flagged it as concerning one of those situations where either a clerk misread the law or someone decided immigrant and veteran didn't belong in the same sentence. I read David's record, looked at the denial, felt that knot in my gut, and thought, no, this one, I'm not going to phone in this one. I show up for, you know what I mean. So I put on my dress blues, 3 silver stars on my shoulders, and headed to Millbrook. The courthouse was classic small town, high windows, old wood, that permanent smell of paper and coffee. When I walked through security in full uniform, the deputy straightened up without thinking. Not because I'm special as a person, but because the uniform is. It says I've spent 30 years sending people's kids into danger and doing everything I could to bring them home. In the courtroom, the noise faded as I took the stand. Veterans in the gallery sat up a little straighter. The judge, a nervous man named Morrison, kept fiddling with his glasses like he wasn't sure if he should call me general or ma'am. David's attorney, Sarah Chen, asked me to explain my job, and I told the jury I oversee personnel policy for hundreds of thousands of soldiers, including how they move from the Army into the VA, and that the law is crystal clear: if you serve honorably, your benefits are yours, period. I walked them through David's story: combat medic, 2 tours in Iraq, a Bronze Star for dragging wounded soldiers out of a mortar barrage, and then I showed them how the Millbrook office ignored all of that to fixate on where he was born. You could feel the room lean in as it clicked that this wasn't about paperwork, it was about keeping a promise. That's when I felt it eyes on me from the back like a weight. That was Officer Ryan Mercer. Forearms straining his short sleeves, buzz cut sharp, leaning against the back wall like he owned the building, hand on his belt, in that way some officers use like punctuation at the end of every sentence. I've spent enough time in war zones and hearing rooms to recognize a certain kind of resentment, the kind that's less about you and more about what you represent, and everything about his stare said he hated that a black woman in a uniform outranked him in his house. During recess, he told the older bailiff, "That woman's got quite an attitude," and when the bailiff answered, "She's a 3-star general," Ryan Mercer snorted. "Rank doesn't mean much when you're helping criminals game the system." I filed his name in the part of my brain labeled problem and went back to the stand. When we came back in, I laid out the regulation that protects immigrant service members, explained that David was absolutely entitled to his benefits, and you could feel the air change as people realized this wasn't about a loophole, it was discrimination. The county's attorney tried to rattle me, asked if my testimony was driven by politics, if I had strong views on immigration, and I told him my view was simple. If someone puts on our uniform and serves honorably, we keep our end of the bargain. Politics stop at the edge of the battlefield. The jury chuckled. The judge relaxed a little, and for a moment I thought, all right, that was the rough part. I was wrong. Out of nowhere, Mercer's voice cut through the courtroom. "Your Honor," he barked from the back, and everyone turned because security officers aren't supposed to speak. Judge Morrison frowned. "Officer Mercer, you're not authorized to address the court. Return to your post," but Mercer was already walking down the aisle, boots loud on the tile, saying, "This witness is disrupting the court with her attitude. She needs to be removed." You ever feel a room tighten like someone turned the oxygen down? That's what it felt like as he came closer, his hand resting on his gun in a way that made every veteran in the room sit forward just a little. I stayed seated because that's what discipline looks like. You don't jump up and start shouting, you keep your voice steady and your spine straight. So I said loud enough for everyone, "Officer, I am providing court-ordered federal testimony. You have no authority to remove me." The judge tried again, but Mercer stepped right up to the stand, leaned in so close I could smell his coffee breath, and whispered, "You think that uniform makes you special. You think those stars mean something in my town. You're just another mouthy black woman who needs to learn her place. It's strange how your body can be full of adrenaline and your mind go very still." I raised my voice just enough to carry Officer Mercer. You are interfering with federal testimony in a legal proceeding. I suggest you step back, and for a split second I saw doubt flicker in his eyes. Then he smiled. I suggest you shut your mouth, he said, and his fist came up in a brutal uppercut that caught me square in the jaw. The sound was like a gunshot. My head snapped back, the chair went with me. My body hit the floor, my jacket tore, I heard my medals and my Purple Heart scatter on the wood, and for a few seconds all I could taste was blood and rage. Someone screamed, someone else yelled for security. The bailiff took a step and froze because Mercer's hand was back on his weapon, and in that moment you could see the whole system hesitate, deciding whether it was going to protect a decorated general or one of its own. Mercer stood over me, flexing his knuckles, and said, "Military don't mean nothing in here, sweetheart. This is my house." I pushed myself up slowly, jaw throbbing, vision pulsing, but 30 years in uniform had taught my body how to stand even when everything hurts. I looked at my Purple Heart on the floor, remembered the blast outside Kandahar that earned it, remembered dragging bleeding soldiers through heat and chaos, and something in me clicked from shock into mission mode. I reached into my inner pocket, pulled out my secure Pentagon phone, and hit a speed dial number I hoped I'd only ever use overseas. The room went quiet. You could hear the ring, and then Colonel Anthony Graves answered Graves. "Anthony, this is General Clark," I said. "Authorization, Alpha 77 Delta Niner. I have been assaulted by local law enforcement while providing federal testimony. I need protocol. 7 FBI military police notification to the Joint Chiefs, and I want a federal investigation into patterns of abuse against military families in this jurisdiction." His tone sharpened. "Affirmative, ma'am. Federal assets en route ETA around 35 minutes. Justice and the chairman will be notified. Are you mobile?" And I said I was, because in my world, mobile and coherent are the baseline. I hung up and looked at Mercer, whose face had lost some color, and told him, "In less than an hour, this building will be full of people who don't care whose house you think this is, and by tonight that punch will be on national news. You just made the worst mistake of your career." The sirens started in the distance, then wrapped around the courthouse. I sat back in the witness chair and waited. Here's the twist. I thought that day was about one racist, power-drunk cop who hit the wrong person in the wrong room. But when the FBI and military investigators started pulling records, when Agent Layla Moreno showed me what they found in malfunctioning systems and dusty file cabinets, it became very clear this wasn't a bad day, it was a business model. Years of complaints against Mercer and others that went nowhere. Internal messages joking about working the deployment calendar lists of military families matched with disability payments and deployment dates. Burglary and traffic stop reports that lined up a little too perfectly with when soldiers were overseas and their spouses were home alone. They weren't just abusing power randomly, they were hunting our people because they thought we were easy. When that hit the Pentagon, it hit hard. Generals who had commanded troops in combat watched the video of me getting punched, then read the stories of sergeants, widows, and kids being shaken down, and they were furious in a way I don't often see directed inward. The Justice Department came with an offer, a big settlement, quiet reforms in Millbrook, sealed investigation for security. Everyone could say justice had been served without airing all the ugly details. On paper, it made sense I'd be protected, the county cleaned up, the news would move on. But I sat there thinking about David, about a Gold Star wife whose benefits vanished after a series of traffic stops, about a young vet who went from a war zone to a county jail because he talked back, and I kept coming back to one thing: if we hide this, we're saying the system only cares when someone with stars on their shoulders gets hurt. So I said no. We took it to trial in Atlanta. Cameras outside, veterans packed into the gallery, and Ryan Mercer sitting at the defense table in orange, looking a lot smaller without his badge. I told the jury exactly what happened in that courtroom and what investigators found afterwards, straight no sugar. Then they heard from the families one by one, and you could see the pattern land in people's faces. The jury didn't take long. Guilty on every count: civil rights violations, assault on a federal officer, conspiracy, racketeering. At sentencing, the judge told Mercer, "You showed no mercy to the families of those who served this country. This court will show you exactly as much mercy as you showed them," and gave him life without parole plus more years than he'll ever live. His Sheriff Tucker got decades too after he flipped and described the whole corrupt network. What mattered most came after the verdict. Policies changed. Hotlines were created. Federal teams were set up so that when a military spouse in some small town calls for help, they are not calling into the dark anymore, and I ended up helping lead that work. So let me leave you with this. If you had been in that courtroom when Mercer walked toward the stand with his hand on his weapon, what would you have done? If this story made you angry or reminded you of a time someone abused a badge or a title and walked away, tell me in the comments whether you think the punishment fit the crime, whether you believe the system can really change, or this was just one loud exception. If you want more real stories about power abuse and people who finally say enough, hit like, hit subscribe, share this with someone who still believes it could never happen here. And tell me down below, in your eyes, was this justice or just the beginning?